Thank you, sir. Thank
Half a denarii for me bloody life story?
There's no pleasing some people.
That's just what Jesus said, sir.
Good morning, everyone. We'll continue with the technical difficulties. All right. Please forgive the crassness of that clip, but I just couldn't resist. I've got a very soft spot for Monty Python films. Can everyone hear me all right? Yep? No one's saying no? Okay. I also couldn't resist finding an image on Google image search about the healing of the man by the pool of Bethesda. I was drawn to this image mainly because of that guy. I'm pretty sure that's the paralytic. And I think the artist was gunning for work on the Sabbath to the max. It's more like pick up your house and walk. Also the angel, I don't know what's going on to the angel. It's almost like he's getting fired. Jesus has his arm up. Sorry, cherub, I'll take it from here. Anyway, usually we move from the sacred to the profane, but this morning we're moving, hopefully, from the profane to the sacred. As I was preparing this message, I immediately thought of that Monty Python clip. Apart from its delightful absurdism, which I'm very drawn to, I believe it raises a very profound question. What on earth was the follow-on story of all those people that encountered Jesus, were healed by him, then went on to live their lives after being delivered from their afflictions? It's not something we talk about that often. But how we answer this question reveals a lot about how we see Jesus and what our identity is in him. Because the real question it reveals is, who am I when the false identities I've shrouded my life with are stripped away? Who am I when the masks I wear drop and the crutches I lean on are pulled out from under me? Has God ever called your bluff and left you feeling like you barely know yourself? What has your response been in those moments? How have you worked through those seasons? I need to be honest, I've been skimming over this passage a lot. I think perhaps one of the qualities that arises from growing up inside church circles is you get stuck in a shallow understanding sometimes of some scriptures. So I began to prepare this message. I found myself having to break through several layers of superficiality to really get at the heart of this passage. For so long, I've been focusing on the healing of the crippled man. In my mind, I've placed all the emphasis on how amazing Jesus is for healing this poor beggar, and have left it at that, thinking the grateful crippled turned able-bodied human would be on his way with nothing but joy and gratitude for the rest of his life. On closer observance of the text and trying to piece together the reasons for why this story was included in the Gospel of John, I've come away from it feeling rather depressed. I find nothing redeeming in this story about this poor crippled man lying by the pool. It's confronting to witness a man experiencing such profound healing but end up closer to resembling a Judas Iscariot figure than a disciple of Jesus. I wonder if this man did indeed contemplate going back to Jesus and asking him to make him a cripple again, just like in the Monty Python sketch. I'd not be surprised if after 38 years, his sense of self and his identity was so consumed by his station in life as a paralytic beggar that even after receiving Jesus' healing and restoration, he remained a beggar in his heart, his soul, and his mind. Can you imagine the impact on your psyche, your motivation in life, your self-esteem, your core identity, self-worth to be lying by a pool for 38 years? 38 is somewhat close to my age. The thought of lying by a pool completely at the mercy of others' charity and goodwill and receiving nothing but the base level for subsistence is an unsettling concept and a very important detail to observe in this passage. If you're similar in age to me, or older, think of all the history packed into your life. Your relationships, travels, education, occupations, experiences, all the joyful times and all the sorrows. Now reduce all that to day after day lying by a pool, hoping, pleading with God and those seeking to give our alms and offerings, that one day you might be delivered from your circumstances. All right. You're most likely thinking, how on earth could you put up with that? How do you cope with such prolonged suffering and disappointment? The answer, I believe, is I don't think you can. These sorts of things have a corroding effect on us. Psychologists refer to it as learned helplessness. Popularly, we use the term victimhood mentality. Sometimes the troubles of life bear down on us for so long, we lose all hope that things will ever change for the better. We might even see ourselves and our hardships and nothing else. Proverbs 13:12 describes it in this way: hope deferred makes the heart sick. I find it revealing that the crippled man's response to Jesus when he asks, "Do you want to be healed?" is indirect. Jesus is asking him more than a simple question. He's asking a question that forces the man to reveal his assumptions. He's also challenging this beggar to see beyond his circumstances. I personally love a direct response. I think it's my love language. Clear and direct communication. Em is most likely sick of hearing me say that line by now. So when I read the crippled man's response to Jesus, I get a little triggered. Come on, man. Of course you want to be healed. Say it how it is. I feel myself reacting. In fact, I was sharing my response over morning tea with Deb Reynolds the other week, and her reply, in her gentle way of delivering a profound word of rebuke, was, maybe God's got something to say to you in that. And she was right. Sometimes my desire for a direct response can overshadow the issue that is being presented, causing more harm than good. Sometimes you simply have to take the long way around with people, allowing space for reflection and meandering. Other times, however, you need to take people at their word and call their bluff, just like Jesus. As a result, I'm trying to read Scripture with a whole lot more grace for people described in it, while also seeing the direct challenge these stories present to us. When I hear the crippled man launch into his sob story, rather than reply with, "Yes, of course I want to be healed," or "No, please leave me alone in my misery," I see a man with a script, perhaps a well-practiced script that he has developed over the years to protect himself. By giving an indirect answer to Jesus, he is saying both yes and no to Jesus simultaneously. He is saying yes to healing, to justify his presence by the pool, and to claim the charity that is handed to him as a result. It is an expected response for someone in this place and predicament. Perhaps being a cripple by the pool, so close yet so far from the promise of healing, is a greater sales pitch to the charitable visitors than if he were by the city gates. We just don't know. He's also saying no. No, I don't want to say yes to healing if it means getting my hopes up, only to have them dashed to pieces again. It's been 38 years. I know that game, and I don't want to go there. I've managed to accept my station in life, and you're not going to take that from me. I don't blame the guy for having a defense that helps protect what little he has in life. I do the same myself. So what is Jesus' response to the yeah but no answer? Let's give him both what he wants and doesn't want at the same time Jesus calls his bluff. Picture Jesus saying, "You're saying yes to healing if only someone can help you into the pool? Well, let's skip the pool part and let's get to what you want. Righto, now that you're healed, are you going to take responsibility for your new life and freedom? Or are you going to take your learned helplessness into your new life?" Tragically, after seeing his Messiah face to face and becoming a witness of his healing and transforming power, he chooses to go with a false identity and sells Jesus out to the Pharisees. I struggle with this. Jesus, you healed his body. Could you not have also healed his mind, his heart, his soul? Unfortunately, Jesus does not work that way, nor should he. The state of your heart, your soul, and your mind is your responsibility. We read on in dismay as the beggar turned healed and healthy man after evading the haranguing Pharisees is later found in the temple by Jesus. We're not told what he is up to, but it's something that elicits a rebuke from Jesus. And instead of choosing Jesus' words and acting on them, the next thing we read is how he's ratting on Jesus as a healer, performing his miracles on the Sabbath, another arrow in the quiver of the Pharisees for when it comes time to arrest Jesus and try him as a criminal. Whether this now healed man was acting in ignorance or duped and manipulated by the Pharisees, or whether he knew exactly what he was doing and had turned vindictive against Jesus' rebuke, I don't know. But based on the information we're given, I cannot draw a cheery conclusion. There is no positive story arc for this character that I can discern, not within the bounds of this passage. Some people just refuse to be reached. But I trust that God can turn even these tragedies towards his purposes and his goodness. And as we read on in the Gospels, we see Jesus' betrayals all playing a part in his redemptive plan for this world. There is so much for me to unpack for my own life. I feel there are so many excuses, defenses, justifications that I set up that hold me back from all that Jesus wants to do in my life. So many that most days I don't even know where to begin to unravel them all. And as I prepared this message, again and again and again, the phrase, "You are not your circumstances," kept reverberating in my head. It's the phrase I imagine Jesus speaking into this crippled man's life. Do you want to be healed? Can you see a life beyond what you have right now? Or has it consumed you entirely? So for me, especially, but for anyone else here today who needs to hear it, can I say to you in Jesus' name, you are not your circumstances. Just as Jesus stepped into this crippled beggar's life and saw the man behind the facades, he's so meticulously constructed, Jesus has the power to step into your life and call your bluff, to see past all the falsities that have been spoken over your life, and past the ones you've said over yourself, knowingly or unknowingly. Through Jesus' death on the cross, his resurrection to new life, and the new life he offers all who call on his name, Jesus has removed every barrier that stands in the way for you to receive a life that is so much more than your current state of affairs. All but the barriers you have placed in your life that you refuse to break down. That's the work each and every one of us has to do. So will you let him in? Will you open the door of your heart, as it says in Revelation 3:20? Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and will sup with them and they with me. What I'm learning to do more and more these days is to let Jesus reach that very centre of my life, past all the false identities that I crowd my life with, past Alex, the invincible farmer, past Alex, the world's greatest creative, past Alex, that untouchable, eccentric weirdo. I save those ones for the good days. Also past Alex, the bad father and the bad son. There's a couple that claw at my soul more than I care to admit. past insecure Alex that nobody likes, past antisocial Alex, past all these voices in my life that are all equally false. I'm trying to let Jesus take up more room. And to speak to that part of me that desperately longs for something real, yearns for something absolutely trustworthy and true. As I see written time and time again throughout Scriptures, I want the presence of God to reach into the very core of my identity and say again and again, "You are my precious child." 1 John 3:1. You were bought at such an invaluable price. 1 Corinthians 6:20. You've been adopted into my heavenly family forever. Galatians 4:4-5. A co-heir with Jesus Christ himself. Romans 8:17. Part of a royal priesthood, a holy nation. 1 Peter 2:9. With an inheritance and destiny kept for you that will never perish, spoil, or fade. 1 Peter 1:4. In those times when I'm so easily tempted to take hold of all that is false, I'm trying more and more to let these truths cut through to the very centre until I sense God's voice say, all these promises I've given you. Can we let those be the starting place when it comes to your self-worth and your identity? And can we look back at all those other, more temporary parts of your identity and see what they shape up to be, rather than playing it the other way around? It's what Jesus is doing in my life, and he can do the same in yours if you let him. I wanted to contrast the tragic story of the man by the pool of Bethesda with something more uplifting. I thought of the story later on in John of the blind man cured by Jesus, who says, all I know is that once I was blind, but now I see. I'm sure you know the story. Such a beautiful picture of truth being spoken to power. I was also reminded of the well-known American poet and hymn writer Annie Johnson Flint. Maybe some of you have heard her name in stories and songs. Unlike the paralytic of the pool, the man by the pool of Bethesda, who came out of a life of physical malady and affliction, only to take a turn for the worse, Annie Johnson Flint lived a life that descended into physical affliction. Yet she never gave up her faith in Jesus, her hope in his promises, and the love of Jesus that is so evident in her words. I'd like to read some words put down by Nick Aufenkamp of Cities Church in Minnesota. It's about the life of Annie Johnson Flint. Few have experienced agony like Annie Johnson Flint, who lived from 1866 to 1932. Both of her parents died during her childhood. She grew up an orphan. Fortunately, in an adoptive family that taught her the scriptures to read, write, and create music. But even then, Annie's childhood dream of becoming a concert pianist was quickly dissolved when she developed rheumatoid arthritis in just her early 20s. The arthritis was so severe that by Annie's 30th birthday, she could no longer walk. Her hands were disfigured, her body was twisted, and she was rarely able to sleep because of the extreme discomfort she experienced throughout her joints. Though her physical body deformed with each passing year, Christ was powerfully being formed in Annie through her agony and suffering. Despite the intense pain it brought to her contorted fingers, Annie became a prolific writer and poet. In lyric and prose, she regularly reflected upon God's word, his promises, and his abiding presence in her life. Though most of her days were spent stuck inside her little room in a sanitarium, she rarely complained about her condition. Those who knew her best often remarked about her bright, encouraging, and surprisingly humorous personality. And it was her heart for these friends that started her writing career, as she created them cards and gift books containing her poetry as a means of encouragement. The Lord multiplied Annie's writing ministry, and soon her words were published and widely distributed. People marveled that such beautiful lyrics could come be composed by hands so compromised by constant pain. And, unlike stereotypical melancholic poets, the dominant theme of Annie's writing was God's goodness. Her writing is filled with reflections upon his goodness in creation, his being and character, his works and his goodness, particularly amid trials and adversity. We see in her poem what God hath promised in lines like, God hath not promised smooth roads and wide, swift, easy travel, needing no guide. Never a mountain rocky and steep, never a river turbid and deep. But God hath promised strength for that day, rest for the labour, light for the way, grace for the trials, help from above, unfailing sympathy, undying love. Annie was ruthlessly honest about life's difficulties. She refused to gloss over pain and suffering. And in her poetry, she never minimised the experience of living in a world marred by sin. But Annie also resisted the equally perilous tendency to become cynical and pessimistic. She, better than most, wrote with one eye on the present hardships and the other on God's eternal goodness and purposes in them. By doing so, she lifted her readers' hearts above their present misery to catch glimpses of God's steadfast love and sovereign wisdom in their trials, as well as offering assurance of the nearness of Jesus in tribulation. I'd like to read the lyrics of my favourite hymn by Annie Johnston Flint for you. He giveth more grace when the burdens grow greater. He sendeth more strength when labours increase. To added affliction he addeth his mercy. To multiplied trials his multiplied peace. When we have exhausted our store of endurance, when our strength has failed ere the day is half done, when we reach the end of our hoarded resources, our Father's full giving has only begun. Fear not that thy need shall exceed his provision. Our God ever yearns his blessing to share. O lean on the arms everlasting availing. Our Father both thee and thy load will upbear. His love hath no limits, his grace hath no measure, his power no boundary known unto men. For out of his infinite riches in Jesus, he giveth and giveth and giveth again. What powerful words coming from someone so afflicted, and what a powerful testimony of the sustaining grace of God. I felt that such stunning words needed to be experienced through the medium of song. So I found a choral arrangement that I thought may have done the words justice. I'm always moved by the harmonies sung by choirs. However, I'm not sharing this song to wow you with the production quality, though it's pretty well put together. Rather, I'd like you to focus on Annie Johnston Flint. This is a photo of her in her wheelchair. And from her bed, her wheelchair, curled up in pain, her words went out into the world to bless and encourage countless numbers of people over the years. Annie was originally from Vineland, New Jersey. She then saw out her later years in Clifton Springs in New York and passed away in 1932. I first heard her story by a Christian apologist and evangelist from Atlanta, Georgia. Listening to her talk off a cassette tape, yep, I remember them, in Sydney back in early 2000s. I heard this hymn sung for the first time in a church service in London back in 2008. We're now about to listen here in Central Victoria a rendition of her hymn by the Covenant Christian High School Choir from Grand Rapids, Michigan, after hearing a bit of her life written by a man from Minnesota almost 100 years after her passing. What an incredible legacy she's left. So please listen to this song with me. And if anything this morning has been stirred up for you and you'd like prayer, equally if you'd like to pray for others, I'd invite you to come to the front while the music plays and receive prayer or offer prayer. I think that would be a beautiful thing to end the service with. So thanks, Ryan. Done an amazing job on that. Thanks.